Within Kantian ethics, one's moral worth is based upon the motive of the act. In order for one to have positive moral worth, his or her action must be driven by a reason, free from any previous desires, emotions, or obligations created by society or even the individual. Instead, one must determine what is moral by achieving true freedom. It is within this viewpoint that Immanuel Kant creates a unique view of freedom, an image of an individual achieving the capacity to act solely on logical reasoning and rationale, away from any sense of a moral construct. Once an individual has gained true freedom, he or she will act solely on reason, leading all humans to the same conclusion, through the law of universal maxims. It is through this process that an individual has gained true moral worth. The law of universal maxims implies that an action is moral if the action could be done by any person and would still be uplifting to humanity. If one has to make an exception for oneself, however, the action is unjust. It is in this way that morality is not subject to change from person to person. However, an individual's moral worth can change over time as people's minds also change over time. Not only do they change their individual views, but as the rationale develops, so can their moral worth. Although the law of universal maxim focuses on the consequence of the action, its effect on humanity is not determined by consequences, but rather by its motive. The law of universal maxim is developed in order to determine right from wrong. However, one should simply act upon the morally permissible action for the sake of it being morally permissible. This unique view is based primarily on the premise that the consequence of the action cannot be determined until the action is completed, and therefore how can we determine the moral worth of the action that came before the consequence? Instead, the action should be determined by the preceding reasoning of the act, essentially the intent. It is because of the intent that a morally correct action may have a negative effect but still hold moral value, while another harmless act, or one that benefits the whole of society, may still hold no moral value since it is done for the wrong reasons. In order to better understand the fluctuations within the moral worth of these two characters, we measured this ethical change over the time of Pearl's life. The x-axis represents the lifespan of Pearl in the novel, with the origin being her birth. The y-axis represents the moral worth of the characters. The positive values on the y-axis imply positive moral worth, with 10 being the highest, while the negative half of the graph implies immoral worth of the character, negative 10 being the lowest. 0, however, indicates that the character has an incapacity for moral worth due to an inability to reason, as exhibited by Pearl from birth to around age 3. It is because of this that there are discontinuities within Dimsdale's graph. Although Dimsdale jumps between positive and negative moral worth, he can never actually touch the x-axis, as he never loses the ability to reason, and therefore always has moral value.
Because the graph is based off of Pearl's age, we shall start with her. The issue with Pearl is determining whether she can reason or not, because she is a child for almost the entire novel. However, Pearl has the ability to reason even though she is a child, because a child is still human. If she did not have the ability to reason, she would simply be used as a means to an end, which contradicts Kant. Her rationality can be seen at an early age through her interactions with Hester, as Pearl continues to question her mother despite knowing the answers, signifying her ability to comprehend the subject matter. Especially during the scenes that include the A and the scenes that deal with the sins of Hester and Dimsdale, Pearl displays sophisticated comprehension on the issues. Pearl's morality grows mainly because she is performing her duty as she matures from the outside of Puritan society, devoid of any bias, socially imposed emotion, and social obligation. Pearl's duty is to reveal the significance of the Puritans' religion because she is described as either a gift from God or some devilish creature. However, due to all the light imagery that accompanies Pearl throughout the novel, it can be inferred that she is of the former. She serves as a catalyst for the people of the Puritan society to think about the way they view their religion. From the time Pearl is born to when Pearl is 3 years old, the graph is flat at 0, which represents amorality because Pearl is too young to rationalize her intent and actions. Upon reaching 3 years old, Pearl is able to rationalize because, as said earlier, she is a gift of God and she must fulfill her duty. At the age of 3, when Pearl is confronted by the governor, Pearl lies to the governor because if she conforms to what the governor says, she is accepting society's restricted way of life, which contradicts who Pearl is. She is a free-spirited and free-reigning and not restricted by human society. Pearl also lies so that she can stay with her mother, as Pearl was given as a way for Hester to learn from her mistakes. Part of her duty is to stay with Hester so that she can help her realize the depth and weight of her burden. Pearl continues to increase in morality because she continues to follow her duty. Her next point displays her work. When Dimmesdale was residing with Chillingworth, Pearl uses the burdock to exemplify her duty. The burdock is a prickly plant native to the Old World, possibly highlighting the sin that is present in the New World. Burdock is also traditionally used as a medicinal herb for purifying blood, symbolizing the need to purify Hester and Dimmesdale. While the burdock is used because it has healing properties, it is also prickly, symbolizing the discomfort that accompanies it as it sticks to one's clothing. Pearl is trying to outline Hester's impurity, following her duty of revealing the severity of Hester's burden that Hester refuses to take upon herself. In a similar sense, when Pearl throws the burdock at Dimmesdale, it can be interpreted as a call to Dimmesdale, for he too is in need of healing. However, Dimmesdale's action of shrinking away with burden from the light missile displays his dread in accepting his burden. There is a slight dip in Pearl's graph because she calls Chillingworth the Black Man, also referring to Satan or the devil. No one truly understands what Pearl is saying in this situation, and thus it creates a very skeptic view of the young child. As immoral as Chillingworth is, she still degrades him to the level of a devil, which in a Puritan society is possibly the worst insult. However, it is still moral because she is abiding by her duty as the gift of God by explicitly revealing the flaws of her audience. In this case, it could also seem very childish and irrational based off emotion and desire, which Kant discourages because it inhibits the ability to reason. After her dip in the graph, Pearl begins increasing once again. At her next point, Pearl is trying to get Dimmesdale to reveal his secret and his flaws as the Puritan minister because her duty is to get the people, not only Dimmesdale, to reflect on their religion and the choices they make based off of their religion. Since Pearl is trying to get Dimmesdale to admit his wrongdoings, she is making it so Dimmesdale will not accept lying as a universal maxim, for lying itself is a degradation of the humanity of others. Pearl's graph increases to the next point sharply because Dimmesdale's continuity reveals that he does not truly understand the burden of his sins. So, her next point is radically different, so she can cause Dimmesdale to realize what must be done in order for him to achieve atonement. In the next scene, when Dimmesdale kisses Pearl on her forehead, Pearl reacts immediately by attempting to wash away his kiss. In doing so, she is physically rejecting Dimmesdale's action with the intent of showing him the immorality of his deed. Because Pearl is pure, the fact that she is attempting to remove the kiss from Dimmesdale shows her disapproval of his immoral intent followed by an essentially corrupt action. Pearl's graph remains stagnant from the scene in the forest to the third scaffold scene because she no longer offers leeway for Dimmesdale. She offers no emotional compensation, causing Dimmesdale to realize the fact that he is running away from his inevitable burden and his inevitable price that he must pay. Pearl's morality does not change in the last scene because of the fact that she is not changing in the intent of her actions. Only when Dimmesdale admits his sin and guilt upon the scaffold out of duty does Pearl recognize his moral worth. For in the scene in the forest she rejects Dimmesdale, but now she accepts him and sees him off. Pearl accepts him upon the scaffold because she recognizes the fact that Dimmesdale now truly understands the burden of his sin, and that he has morally atoned for his sin with the correct intent. Pearl is able to judge this because, once again, she is pure, righteous, and serves as a moral guide for Dimmesdale, Hester, and the Puritan society in general. All they must do is make the cognitive choice to follow